Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Gomes. I'm here to talk with you about Vedic astrology, how it explains events in our world, and also how it affects our lives. I just want to say that you can contact me for lessons or a reading at 508-525-0001. Again, that's 508-525-0001. You can text me at that number, or you can email me at garygomesg@gmail.com. I will be putting on this channel a bit later this week a conversation I had with Jean Karazian, excuse me, from Lebanon. And I think you'll all be interested in that because it shows different ways that you can interpret a chart. It's actually a more practical astrology lesson, but it also gives you ways in which you can deal with some of the problems in your chart. So it's a really useful interview. I think Jean's a great guy, and he's a very well respected astrologer in Lebanon and around the world. So, all right. So, yeah. Also, if you like the channel, please do subscribe. We're really close to 1,000 subscribers now. Thank you very much, everyone. And hopefully we can expand from there. The other thing is, please share it with your friends. I share it online myself. Please share with your friends. Also, if you'd like to be on the show or if you have questions you'd like me to address, please do so at your convenience. Um, and again, I'm very easy to contact. I'm not at all a recluse. I get back to people pretty quickly, uh, but I need to hear from you. So you can ask me about the cost of a reading or how much I charge for readings, how much I charge for lessons, but I can't release that information on the video. And again, just contact me and we'll talk. Uh, there's no obligation, obviously. Okay. All right. So I might talk about the elephant in the room before I go on to this week, and that is the news story about the Zelensky Trump encounter on Friday. And I actually drew up a chart. Believe it or not, although perhaps if I'd done a little bit more research earlier than today, I would have had it, but unfortunately I didn't. And so I estimated the time at around noontime on in Washington, D.C. And it's actually not really surprising they got into an altercation then. Um, so let me just see if I can pull up the chart and show you. So this is perhaps the best example of what I would call an astrologically determined event. If you look in, so this is the chart from February 28th, around noontime, the rising sign, so if it was a little bit before then or a little bit after then, the rising sign is still going to stay the same. And we have Mars in the first house. This is an argumentative position. It's I'll show you a chart in a second, which kind of bolsters um, this particular um, area or this particular aspect. But Mars is in the first house. Mars fights. Mars argues. It's in a sign connected with Gemini, which is essentially kind of a hyper-aggressive sign. Okay. Uh, and Mars is aspecting K2. And as a matter of fact, if you've seen a little people a little more energetic or a little bit more prone to fighting recently, um, that's what's causing it. The other thing is we had a new moon on that day within 1 degree of Saturn. Okay, so if the moon is in conjunction with Saturn in a transit chart. It's different in a natal chart, but so a birth chart, because if you have a moon conjunct Saturn, this doesn't apply to you, but it does apply to transit charts. Moon and Saturn together can give bad judgment. And I think that's what happened really I would say, on all sides on Friday. Um, so, and so I'm not defending either side. I'm just saying this Mars in the first house is volatile. It's Venus and Mercury. Mercury's debilitated. It's a cancellation of debilitation because Venus is exalted in the sign. But I've never seen a debilitated planet not show some effects. And Mercury is a planet connected with speech. And Rahu never seems to have enough. It never seems to have quite what it wants. So you have uh, essentially these are the combinations for leaders. Both leaders were stubborn. Jupiter's the more diplomatic planet. Venus is diplomatic as well. So this is why there was a trade deal trying to be negotiated, um, given the nature of the chart. But Rahu will frustrate that to a certain extent. So let's go to, let me see if I have Zelensky's chart here, because Zelensky's chart is really telling in this. Here he is. Okay. All right. So again, some of these charts are a little bit off, but Zelensky's birth chart, Jupiter is in his house of speech. It's retrograde. Mars is in the third house. That can give kind of an aggressive personality. Um, K2's in the 11th house of gains. So any gains that he could see coming from this um, were he would be afraid they would be taken away. And actually, I read the full transcript of the speech. The resentment bubbled over into comments about what happened as far back as the Obama administration. Okay, when Russia invaded Crimea. So it's really not even. I would I would say it's a series of built-up resentments. Jupiter's in the second house, so this guy is always going to think he's right. Okay, so and Jupiter's in Mercury, which is in Gemini, which is a sign uh, which can be uh, it can make the person argumentative. Jupiter and Mercury exchange signs. So Mars is aspecting Mercury in this chart. Mars is aspecting natal Mercury. But I think the most critical thing to look about with this chart is, even though we have an exchange, we have a cancellation of debilitation with Mars in the third house. This Mars is still dominant in this chart. So this is going to be a person who's not really going to be amenable to negotiation, to be honest. If so, I'm not saying he's wrong. That's totally beside the point. I'm giving an astrological analysis, but also that Mars on top of Jupiter can give kind of a self-righteous determination. If we look at Trump's chart on that same day, just quickly, so I don't want to spend too much time eating up too much time with this. Um, Right. So this Mars is where Trump's Mercury is, and he's got uh, Rahu Venus in the eighth. I don't think, I honestly don't think this was a setup. I think this was essentially a situation um, in which the terms of the relationship between the United States and Ukraine were changing, and it was um, the way I look at it is essentially Ukraine was getting aid from the United States and not having a commitment to pay it back. Uh, what the Trump administration is doing is a variation on what China is doing in certain countries. So, so essentially, what China is doing in certain countries is they're going in, they're saying, well, you need a loan, okay, that's fine, but we'll claim um, this part of land or this part if you can't repay the debt. Now, this doesn't mean, to my mind, this doesn't mean the United States will take over the country if they don't repay the debt, which is the implication of the Chinese arrangements, as I understand them. But it is essentially, it does impose an obligation on Ukraine to, in some way, pay back the money that it was provided by the United States. So this was an argument over Trump. This was an argument over a business deal. And I think also Trump's default style is to essentially, as a negotiator, it's essentially to humiliate uh, the partner into submission. And I think that default because of the Sun Saturn conjunction, Sun Saturn Moon conjunction, backfired in this particular case. Am I convinced that this means the war will not be over soon? No, I don't think that's the case. I think that Zelensky's trying to figure out right now whether or not he can um, deal with people or with countries other than the United States and hang out and not have to compromise. Um, but so I'm not taking sides in this particular argument. I'm being careful not to take sides in this particular argument uh, because I'm trying to describe it from a purely analytical perspective, a purely analytical astrological perspective. Um, so we'll see what happens. My prediction, May, June, July, we'll see a resolution to this conflict. So I don't think it'll go on much longer, to be honest. But again, there will be efforts to try to get Europe to um, take over for the United States, but Europe has financial problems of its own right now, and I think it's going to be tough for them to do that, although it looks obviously like they want to do that. And again, I don't know how much of this is posturing and how much of it's real. I do want to look at, we have an eclipse coming in a couple of weeks. I want to look at that quickly. So this will be the first eclipse of the year, March 14th, and I'll go into that in more detail next week. Um, but I don't want to I don't want to spend too much time on that. And we have a New Year's chart coming up for the world on May 29th, uh, right on top of another eclipse. So this is interesting. But let me just see now. So again, this is a simple astrological analysis of the debate that or the discussion that occurred um, on Friday, is it the end of the world if the president loses his temper with an ally? I really don't think so. Is it the end of the world if the ally tries to get other support? I don't think that's the case either. I just think it's personally I would have rather both of them not said anything, to be honest. But it's said it's out there, and again, there's this concept in economics called the fallacy of composition, in that one event or your immediate surroundings determines how a particular event is going to turn out. Um, it ignores other phenomena happening in the world. And the reason it's called a fallacy is because one particular event won't necessarily cause the collapse of a negotiation strategy. Okay, it's just an event. Okay, and to my mind, it wasn't. It, it happened near an eclipse. It didn't happen on an eclipse, so the ramifications for it will not last for 6 months or a year. Okay, so let me just let me look up the March 14th eclipse. I have this on my other computer. Sorry, eclipse. It's a lunar eclipse. The solar eclipse occurs on the 29th, and the new year. Okay, so Friday, March 14th, 2025. So let's look at that. March 4th. And we'll use Greenwich, England, and its star at. We'll use the starting point of the eclipse. 3:57. Then I have to check out whether it's PM or AM. I think it's AM. Hold on a second. Yeah, AM. And UT is judged from Greenwich, uh, in the UK, I'll just use that for convenience. This eclipse will be over North America, largely over North America. So the eclipse should be on the screen. I'll stop it and save it and share it again. Okay. Share. All right, so you can see the eclipse point. So Mars is still in Gemini, as you can see from the chart. The rising sign is Sagittarius. This is the United States rising sign, and a few other countries as well. Um, the eclipse point occurs with the moon in Leo. So again, this does indicate some leadership changes. Um, Saturn aspects moon. So some attacks. It's a full moon. Eclipses only occur, lunar eclipses will I'm sorry, March 14th. Yeah, eclipses will only occur on a new moon or a full moon. And let's see now. Venus is in the fourth house along with Rahu, along with Mercury. So I think we can expect some popular unrest, um, maybe in the United States, certainly in the Americas, maybe even in Greenland, because I believe this eclipse point actually hits Greenland. It's largely a Western Hemisphere eclipse. Uh, and um, so at least if I'm looking at it, Saturn's in the third house, so there can be some economic pressure. That's coming up. That's going to be much stronger around the end of the month. Saturn's really close to entering Pisces, and I, I'm thinking from the chart, Venus is exalted but retrograde, so it is still strong, but it's a little bit twisted. And Mercury's in the fourth house, so I think we can see some very definite media scandals happening around that time. Some very definite scandals happening in seats of power, especially in representative governments. So when I'm talking about representatives, I'm not talking about the presidency per se. I'm talking about uh, you know uh, elected officials, local and national. So I'm thinking more about shorter term positions in the presidency. And K2's in the 10th house. So we're still going to have some disputes over authority and whether or not the president can actually do anything. This may result, I hope it doesn't, but it may result in some demonstrations, maybe some violence, maybe some political violence. And also, one of the problems we have is um, with the Sun Saturn conjunction in Aquarius and with Mars in an air sign as well. It gives more potential for accidents, for air accidents. There are some potentials for earthquakes, but we have to look at different parts of the world. I'm going to go there really quickly. So let me just go right there right now, and then I'll go back to the original chart I normally start from. Okay, so if we're looking at Mars, we have some earthquake or some violence potential in California, uh, even in Western Canada. And also, if I look carefully, because we have the moon, sun, and Rahu, some violence or domestic upheaval or scandals in Brazil, Guyana, and Paraguay, and Uruguay, and also in Argentina. If I'm looking over, this will affect Spain, Portugal, France, uh, Germany, Norway, Sweden, and we also have um, a sun moon combination going over Ukraine and Saudi Arabia and also Egypt and Turkey. So I'm expecting to see some activity. Turkey does have potential for earthquakes, but again, it's in the western part of the country, closer to Syria. And Africa also has some potential for violence. Some very hard economic times down here. If I'm going out to this part of the world, some violence in Korea, some potential air catastrophes in Japan, and also, and also some economic disruption in Japan as well. So let me go back to the main chart. So we'll talk about this eclipse more in more detail next week. I want to get back to the reading for this week. So this isn't to scare people. I think once they have a chance to look at this a little more detail, I'll give a better analysis. Okay. All right, so this is for now, and we still have that Mars in the first house. So, so essentially, I normally do the shows a little bit earlier on Sundays. I guess I'm just kind of stuck with Mars and Gemini. And Mars and Gemini are essentially what I would call their is they're both connected with the third house of both passion and aggression. Okay. Um, Brothers, siblings, alliances, allegiances. So you will have fights breaking out between allies or between people in your life. K2 is right now is stationary direct. Rahu stationary direct. Mercury just entered Pisces a few days ago, so people will have problems with their memory over the next few days, that's for sure. The only thing I always encourage people to do is whenever you see Venus and Jupiter in combination, even through mutual exchange of signs, is not to be too overly optimistic. So you may get some windfalls this week. I know a lot of people are getting that tax, um, the tax payment are going to that's going to happen this month. And so you'll see a little more money going to the economy, especially for retirees, especially retirees who work for the government, interestingly enough. So but I think there'll be more aggressive action taken in matters connected with the United States, connected with our allies across the world. So our allies are going to be pissed at us. We're going to be pissed at our allies, excuse my language, for the next, I would say, couple of weeks. And I don't see that causing any major breakdown in trade. There will be some panic about the tariffs. I'm seeing some kind of economic shakeups because of that, because of the Mercury being debilitated, and that will also hurt trade to a certain extent. And in people's lives, just be careful traveling because I've been on the road the past few days and people seem to be really careless. And I think it's the Mars K2 aspect. I'll actually, believe it or not, be happier when Mars moves into Cancer than I am right now because basically people are very aggressive on the roads with Mars in this sign. In terms of the media, which I tend to focus on a lot, the media is lying or misrepresenting a lot of the stuff that's going on right now. Um, that's that's because of the Mercury K2 opposition. So um, this seems like an old theme with me, but I just remember the United States chart and the media is ruled by Mercury. It's a very gossipy planet. It likes to cause friction. It likes to cause interest. So, this is sort of like the basic nature of Mercury in an Indian chart. It likes to teach, it likes to communicate, yes, but it doesn't always communicate the truth. Just to be honest with you. And the main point about Mercury and Venus being together is it's also a commercial combination. So, so we've seen a lot of attention on media figures over the past couple of weeks, like MSNBC firing some of its staff, and a lot of channels essentially cutting down or cutting back. Uh, the attempts to cut government will not go away anytime soon. For the people who think they can just outweight it or litigate it into non-existence, that's not going to happen. They'll just delay it, not uh not eliminate it. Just because the major planetary periods the United States is entering. Um, and I think in the long run, that will be healthy for the United States in the long run. in the short run, it'll cause some disruption, obviously. But but just in terms of the United States chart, after we're in a Mercury subperiod right now, we're in a K2 subperiod relatively soon. K2 is kind of a cutting or mendicant chart placement, so it tends to take things away. So I think that we're looking at it, if we're looking at a K2 period coming up and not expecting to trade off something for something else. That's not going to happen. There'll always be a trade-off. Let's move to the actual individual astrological signs because I know a lot of you tune in exactly for that, specifically for that. So, and I apologize for taking so long to find the the Zelensky Trump debate. Um, but let's go with the actual astrological signs. So Aries has a great deal of desire, a great deal of ambition this month. It's a good it's a good week for money, good week for financial progress. Um, but again, you have to watch out for careless expenses, especially caused by relationship partners. And also Saturn will make Sun in the 11th house and Saturn in the same house will make the sign work very hard for what it gets. Um, Venus and Mercury in the 12th house, so good for dealing with people from other countries. Um, but again, you have to watch out about either being ripped off at home or people taking advantage of you from within the family. Uh, for Taurus, Taurus has Jupiter in the first house, Venus, Moon, Mercury in the 11th house. So again, good for financial gains for Taurus, good for increased financial improvement. But the thing to keep in mind is there may be what I would call silly expenditures or overambition. The Moon Venus conjunction is kind of interesting because it is one of the combinations that can fool us about relationship partners. So essentially it provokes strong feelings of trust in relationships, but it's with Rahu, so again, it's not really a good time, uh, at least this week, to get into long-term relationships, and I would argue for another couple of months. For K2s in the fifth house, so children will be a little bit difficult or a little bit withdrawn. Sun and Saturn are in the 10th house, so good for work, very good for career expansion. For Gemini, our friends Gemini, June 15th, July 15th, Mars is in the first house. They're going to want to get a lot done. They'll achieve a lot of what they want in relationship life. Jupiter is in the 12th house, so there can be some sexual relations from this placement. But again, this combination indicates it really won't last that strongly. So again, that's something you have to watch out for. So it doesn't mean the relationship itself will collapse, but again, maybe a little bit overly optimistic about how well the relationship is actually going to be going. K2's in the fourth house, so there is some disagreement with family members. Um, and Jupiter's in the seventh house, so again, relationship partners will seem to be distant again. That's an ongoing problem for Gemini until Jupiter enters the sign in the summertime. And Saturn and Sun in the ninth house, very good for expanding your reputation, and so is Venus, Moon, and Mercury in the 10th house. So those are all good placements for the sign career-wise. And there is some fame or notoriety overseas, so that's a good thing. And when I say notoriety, that is the person will become well-known, not that they'll get in trouble. Cancer has Moon and its Lord Moon in Venus, same sign with Moon Venus, and Rahu. That's a kind of a Raj Yoga for this particular rising sign. It'll give good financial gains to Cancer, but also a lot of obligations, a lot of debt. And I think when I see combinations like this, it's good to spend, but it's also good to be careful in spending. K2's in the second house. So K2 being in the second house can give thought of speech. And I think that's basically what happened with Trump. This is K2's that's from Leo. But if we talk about Cancer, let's go back to Cancer again. My apologies, I jumped ahead a little bit. The second house over here is Sun. The Lord of the second house is in the seventh house. So there'll be a lot of obligations because of a relationship partner. Um, and also hidden debts on relationship partners' part. But overall, this is a lucky month for Cancer. Jupiter's in the 10th house of career. Uh, Mars is in the 12th house, so it can give more fights with relationship partners, but nothing all that lasting. For Leo, Leo has the Lord of the first house is in the seventh, so most of your attention will be focused around relationship partners. Um, I think uh, uh, when you take this Venus, Rahu, Mercury combination in the eighth house, and Mars is in an angle from it, that creates a lot of boost for this particular sign. K2 is in the second house, so people will either misunderstand you or communications will not come out quite right. Um, so I think that at this particular time. And there is some danger that this sign will lose status um, within about 4 months or so. But basically, um, let me just see now. But basically, I think the K2 in this house will actually invigorate the sign. It'll make it stronger. Let's see now. At least that's from my experience. And let's see now. So K2 So we have K2 in the second house in Virgo. So intuition will be sharp, it will be strong. Uh, Sri Lagna is in the sixth house, good for financial gains, especially through hard work. Some inherited money, some unearned money, some difficulties with a relationship partner, though, and also with allies. And Jupiter is in the 10th house. The Lord of the 10th goes to the 11th house. I'm sorry, the Lord of the ninth house goes to the 11th house. So generally, it's a lucky time for this particular for Leo, with some problems. We have all those planets in the eighth house. That's going to give some problems about uh, what you say, whether or not people believe you, whether or not you communicate clearly. So pay attention to those particular things in your daily life. For Virgo's in the first house. Um, this is again September 15th to October 15th, so I'm trying to give you reference points. Venus is in the second house. Second house Lord is in the seventh house, so that gives increased financial gains to relationship partners for this particular sign. They're not long lasting, but they are present. And also career-wise, there can be some unrealistic expectations about career, although this sign does want to plug onward with career. Anyway, when I say unrealistic expectations, it's not like you're going to lose your job or anything. It's just that maybe you're expecting to get promoted or get exactly what you want. That Mercury is a little bit overly um, optimistic, is a little bit unfocused. Uh, the Sun and Saturn in the sixth house gives this sign a strong determination to overcome obstacles. Seventh house Lord, it'll give new business opportunities or new or improvement in some aspects of life, and I think overall, in particular, it'll give you better relationships or better relationship partners. So, when I say relationship, that also applies to work. Mars is in the 10th. We'll be working very hard and a little bit angry about it. For Libra, Libra has the Lord of the first and the sixth. It's retrograde. It's along with Mercury, which is the Lord of the ninth house and the 12th house of expenditures. Um, so there'll be some study for this sign, some increased intelligence, but only through hard work, and also some increased financial success, especially from the government because of Mars being in the ninth house. Jupiter's in the eighth house. It will give some unexpected expenses and losses. Yeah. And people with small pets should pay close attention to the health of their small pets because of K2 being in the 12th house. And Mars aspecting it. So that aspect will only last for a couple of more weeks. Okay. But overall, career-wise, not bad. Work is a little bit challenging, a little bit worrisome, but overall, this is not a bad time for Libra. So this is October 15th through November 15th, or Libra sun or moon, excuse me. For Scorpio, Scorpio has Mars in the eighth house. We've spoken about this before. So that gives this sign the feeling of being caged in a little bit. But Jupiter is aspecting the first house. It makes it lucky. K2's in the 11th house. Again, don't trust your friends. That's true until July for Scorpio. Excuse me, let me get these pop-ups out of the way. Um, some problems or some needed repairs in home. Venus, Moon, Mercury, a lot of attention or interest in creativity, a lot of financial growth through that as well, uh, and also opportunities for entertainment. Jupiter aspects the first house. Overall, not a bad month. Just stay out of new long-term relationships and try to avoid being taken advantage of in long-term relationships. For Sagittarius, Sagittarius has Jupiter's in the sixth house. Mars is aspecting it. So it's going to feel like it has to struggle a little bit to make itself understood. Jupiter will go into the sign in July. That should clear things up. That should make a lot of progress for this particular sign after July. There will be some problems, domestic problems, over the next couple of months, if I'm quite honest with you. So just be aware of that. And some arguments and fights at home and maybe even with parents. For the second house lords in the third house, strong desire for financial success. And there'll even be some aggressive action, I think, taken to achieve financial success over the next couple of months. K2 is in the 10th house. K2 in the 10th is usually an indication that some unseen forces are at work in the workplace, hampering you. There may be people who think you're not quite ready, or people who suspect your motives. That's their problem. You don't have to worry about them, but it will block your progress for another couple of months. So the best thing to do is keep on doing what you're doing, and eventually you'll have a lot of success. For Capricorn, Capricorn has Saturn and Sun in the second house, and Venus, Mercury, and Moon in the third house. So this is good for financial growth, a lot of ambition, and a lot of some worry about financial success, about um, financial losses. But basically, this is an optimistic placement in the third house. Uh, and it's good for trade for this particular sign. Jupiter's in the uh, fifth house in this chart. Overall, a lucky placement. Jupiter's not a particularly friendly planet for Capricorn rising, but it's still a lucky planet, just in general. Mars is in the sixth house, so hard work will pay off for the sign. K2's in the ninth. Unexpected complaints or disagreements with either the government or your boss. So be careful. It's tax season, so that's kind of audit season. Um, but again, it need not. That depends on your individual chart. It doesn't necessarily depend on not every Sagittarius is going to get hit with that. Um, and again, remember this is December 15th uh, through January 15th for the sun sign. So for Aquarius, Sun and Saturn are in the first house. That's not a bad placement at all. It gives ability to control others, ability to get exactly what you want. Venus, Mercury, and Moon are in the second house. So this is good for financial gains through hard work, shifting desires or ambitions, and also uh, they'll tend to be kind of a scattershot approach to dealing with work and money matters. So people with this combination will feel, if they're so inclined, they'll feel a lot of temptation to write, to talk, to participate. Okay. Um, Mars is in the fifth house. In this chart, Jupiter's in the fourth, so a very good time for education for the sign. Mars is in the fifth house. Quick acquisition of skills, quick understanding. Ketu's in the eighth house. Some problems with digestive issues or even issues connected with um, the sex organs, so you should be mindful of that. The elimination organs in particular um, are affected by K2. So if you have some unusual dietary problems or other problems in that part of the body, that's K2 doing that. K2 essentially um, makes it difficult. It can give some problems like either intestinal problems or aggravated heartburn, things like that, to a lot of signs, actually. So overall, not a bad week for Aquarius. Again, like I said, just be aware that you're not trying to bite off more than you can chew. For Pisces, the same holds true. Pisces has Mercury debilitated in the first house. It's very optimistic because it's got the support of Venus and Jupiter. So that will mean you'll have some success, especially in creative projects and especially in activities with children. But there'll be a tendency to pile too much on yourself. There'll be a tendency to try to do too much at once. So just be careful about that and try not to burn yourself out over the next few weeks. Um, let's see now. Mars is in the fourth, so some fights at home. K2's in the seventh. Relationship partners will seem either distant or non-existent or overly critical. And Sun, Saturn, you have to watch out for overspending. Like I said, a lot of what I've seen in the chart for many signs indicates a lot of what I would call impulse buying. So people are either buying in anticipation of prices going up or in anticipation that they better grab what they can right now before things start to become unavailable, if that makes sense. And a lot of it's just Venus wanting to enjoy herself in Pisces. Okay, so it's it's not necessarily a, a bad thing. And Jupiter is encouraging luxury, is encouraging consumption. So again, not necessarily a bad thing, but keep in mind that is one of the things that keeps inflation high. Overconsumption does actually keep inflation high. So I'm not telling you to stop buying what you need. Again, it's just be thoughtful about that. Let's look at the um, time-space change chart for this particular chart. Okay, so we do have some activity close to the Hawaiian Islands, some increased government control over Alaska and the Hawaiian Islands. Um, maybe some governmental scandal again showing up in all of Western Canada, Oregon, Washington, and California, just because of this particular Mars line coming down here. This is interesting. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting to me. There's a Jupiter line passing right through Wisconsin all the way down through Indiana, down through Kentucky, Tennessee, down through Georgia, and into Florida, and down to Cuba, then into Venezuela, and touching Paraguay, Uruguay, and Brazil. So this means a return to a more traditional society, uh, but the government's going to get involved in Puerto Rico, uh, Venezuela, and Brazil, all the way down through Bolivia and Argentina. So this looks interesting. South America looks like it's going to be in for some both political scandals uh, in the governments connected with the countries I just mentioned, and also some popular dissatisfaction happening, especially in Brazil. And let's see now, and a lot more communications issues. So I know that Brazil's been engaged in an ongoing conflict over freedom of speech, and I think all this will start to affect trade with the country, and it will also affect the country's reputation just a little bit. Um, there are no Greenland does have this intersection, so there'll be ongoing discussions about Greenland. Um, I don't know how that's going to turn out. This isn't. I was actually looking at some history, and this isn't the first time the United States expressed interest in Greenland. So so I'm not sure we should get all that freaked out about it. Um, let's see now. Um, so it's not that it's an unusual position, but basically these discussions have gone on for got over as as far back as the purchase of Alaska by Seward, even before that. So so it's kind of interesting, and periodically it comes up like once every 60 years or so. Um, so let's see now. There's a descending sun line coming down through Norway, Sweden, Germany, and Greece, and down into uh, Algeria, down into um, I believe it's the Congo here, and down here all the way down to South Africa. And uh, um, there's a Jupiter line over rifle succession. So there'll be some kind of rifle succession dispute going on in those countries. So I know Germany's forming a new government. That may be how it's affecting Germany and also maybe Greece. And there's also, I have to look at a Saturn line heading over Turkey and Bulgaria and the other Eastern European states, uh, also Poland. So there may be some anxiety over perceived Russian encroachment. Don't know, but also some economic issues, definitely. And that goes through Egypt, Sudan, all the way down to through the former Portuguese colonies and down again into South Africa. So we should see some economic shakeups in that part of the world. Um, I think that's Mozambique over here. I always get those a little bit screwed up. My apologies, folks. Mars is going through Iran. and there's a moon line going up through Kazakhstan and also close to Pakistan and Afghanistan. And I've asked you to pay close attention to Pakistan and Afghanistan for quite a while right now. I think we're going to see some kind of regional conflict, either that or some kind of immigrant crisis, similar to what the United States and Europe have faced, but this time spilling into India. There's not a lot of activity over India per se, or over Thailand or Myanmar um, or Vietnam. It doesn't mean anything's happening there, but there are no real changes there. Uh, Sun is going over China, so we have increased governmental control over China. And finally, we have this Rahu Saturn line going over Philippines, over Indonesia. So there will be some concern, and close to Singapore, and so there will be some concern over governmental rule there in those countries. And again, as I said, uh, we're still in for what I would call a revolutionary fervor around April of this year, which could expand because of the eclipse happening March 29th, could expand. It could last until the end of the year. Um, the other thing is, but again, these aren't the same duration or length as what happened in 1967, 1968. So again, that's why I'm not quite as perturbed about it. Some of these countries probably could benefit from change in administration, but I don't know what's going on locally, and I don't pretend to be an expert on those things. That's for the people of those countries to decide. With as little outside interference as possible. All right. All right. So North Korea and South Korea have a Mercury line passing over them. Wow, that's interesting. And also, see what line that is. Also, a Jupiter line. So this is fascinating. So both North Korea and South Korea will be in a state of disarray. We'll hear a lot about them, maybe in relationship to Japan. Um, Australia is also um, has some internal strife in the western part of the country, and there will probably be some change in governments in the eastern part of the country, and also maybe some violence going through New Guinea. New Zealand is not touched by anything, but again, I think they're going through some governmental reform right now, and I think that that's largely going to take care of itself. Now, before I sign off, first of all, let me thank you for making it this far. I really do appreciate you. I love you all. I value you all. I thank you so much for watching. And please take care of yourselves over the next week or so, in particular with this Mars and Gemini. Um, don't It's not a matter. I just want to clarify what I'm saying about news and what you're hearing about and what rumors are spreading around. So let me just see if I can uh, explain that. It's not really a matter of disbelieving uh, one branch of the news and believing another branch of the news. It's more a matter of we should probably all be skeptical and do engage in due diligence in terms of the reports hearing from different people. And that's true on both sides of the political spectrum, on all sides of the political spectrum. Uh, and the reason I'm saying this is mainly because of what I had said before. Um, the news map of the United States is not trustworthy. News itself is not really a trustworthy business, although we wish it were. And again, keep in mind, most news outlets are concerned, most news outlets and most communications outlets are concerned with getting you to tune back in because it's a commercial advantage for them. So if things are going well, you're not going to tune back in because you're going to say, well, I can watch this movie or I can spend some time doing things I actually enjoy or that bring me or that are fun, rather than worrying about whether or not this guy is winning or that guy is winning or whether or not the viewpoints you adhere to are being honored by certain politicians. It's um, I asked you to take a very detached view of both government and media, and that is you should believe them at times and you should question them at other times. It's not that I'm anti-media or anti-communication. I I I'm fascinated by the phenomenon of communication in human beings, but I'm also aware that it's not always reliable, and you have to go back and look at source materials in order to find out what really happened. Not everybody has time to do that. I appreciate that. But that also means don't get upset if you hear something that's potentially threatening, and especially if somebody says, this is the worst thing that can possibly happen. Um, that's almost never the case. In my 72 years, it's I've lived through so many uh, events that were supposed to be catastrophic, which in the long run turned out to be basically nothing. So just keep that in mind. There is a real financial situation all around the world that's happening that's very real. So I don't want to lessen that. Uh, but uh, that can be that can be fixed. That can be addressed. Okay. All right. So again, in the meanwhile, I love you all. Don't worry. Go after your dreams, no matter what they are, as long as they don't harm anybody, and especially not yourself. And I love you all, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Hope you made it all the way through. I love doing this, and thanks for watching. Bye bye.